Hey guys, welcome to You the Boss podcast, episode 63. I'm your host, Pam, and today we're going to be talking about who would you be without fear. I want to unpack this a little bit because it is such a general question, and I want to say that we're going to talk about who we really are when fear isn't calling the shots. We're going to talk about people pleasing a little bit. We're going to talk about doubt, and we're going to talk about judgment. And I want to ask you, who would you be without the fear? What decisions would you make? What dreams would you pursue? What would be your choice of going back to school or ever going to college? Would you pursue going to law school even though maybe you're 40 and have never gone to undergrad? Would you start a business? Would you close up your business and go back to a 9 to 5? Most of us are building our lives based around fear. So maybe you're staying in business because you're afraid to go back to work because how does that look? How does it look that I failed in my business or that I'm making the decision to go back to a structured environment? Or how could I possibly quit my job right now because I just bought a house, or I I love my job. I just don't want to do it anymore. Or what would it look like if I went to school for all these years and now I'm suddenly deciding that I don't want to do this career anymore and that I want to do something else. And we're building our lives around those fears, and that's not a point of freedom. We're not being free with our choices, and I think it's time for us to flip that. I think that fear fear is something that we internalize. It's kind of like something that we build our identities on. And what I mean by that is the fear of failure is what shapes your quote unquote perfectionist personality. You know, you're afraid to fail, you're afraid to feel rejection, you're afraid to post something online because it's so scary now to post things. I'm like, oh, I don't want to go viral. And it's like, you don't have to go viral. Like, you don't that doesn't have to be your intention if you want to post something. And I think it's also important to note that I know I talk a lot about social media on this podcast, and I talk a lot about, you know, putting things out into the world. And I think it's important for me to kind of say as a side note that I talk about it a lot because number one, that's the space I'm in. Number two, most of anyone in our lives right now, in some fashion or another, is influenced by something on the internet. As much as we don't want to admit it, it is what it is. When you go to buy something online, you look up reviews. If you're the kind of person and you're listening to this and you don't look at any reviews online and you go to a physical store and you just buy things and you just do things, congratulations. I think that is awesome. But for the other 99.9% of us, it is shaped around that. And so it's very quick for us to see different people maybe fail online, and maybe you see people post things online and you're like, okay, well, that content wasn't very good, or playing small, basically. And that comes from a sense of fear. It comes from feeling like everything needs to be picturesque, everything needs to be super aesthetically pleasing, everything needs to fit what everyone else is going to see, as opposed to what you're going to see and what you're going to have to live with. And so that's building your personality through that fear. It's common to fear judgment of others. You're afraid of, what are my friends going to think now? And I know that in a boss mentality, in an abundant mentality, we start to say things like, I don't care what anyone else thinks, and my friends are super supportive, or any of those kinds of things. And while some of that is true, you probably really don't care necessarily. But if you've ever had the thought process of, well, I don't want to go viral, or, oh, I don't want to tag those brands, or, you know what, I'm really not trying to pursue that. Like, this is just fun for me. Like, I don't want to take the fun out of it. And It's because you have a fear of judgment, probably because maybe you judge others. I would say, sorry, but I'm not. You judge other people and you have faced rejection and you don't like how it felt, which is normal. You have a fear of failure. Who doesn't? But you also have a fear of success. You're afraid that if you did post the thing for fun, that people would expect more of you. And now you're afraid of success instead of standing in the reality that I just posted this for fun. This is not meant to be something that's going to replace my income, or I'm going to be a different person now. Like, it's okay to have success in something or to be good at something and not make it into a completely different new career. I think there, I have to share this with you guys personally, and anyone in my close circle knows this to be true. I spent the first half of my maternity leave, outside of being exhausted, I spent it being 110% afraid. I was afraid because I was still getting paid for my job and I couldn't figure out how I was going to put in my 2-week notice and not go back there. I couldn't, it haunted me, honestly. And because of that fear, I couldn't even verbalize it for so long. And I think in some ways this took away from me enjoying my maternity leave because I was, in a way, constantly trying to like come back to reality and come back into the spin of the world. And I couldn't. Every time I tried to like get back into the quote unquote swing of things, I couldn't. There was a sleep regression. There was something that reminded me to be present in the now. And I was leading from a position of fear for that first half of my maternity leave. And it wasn't until my son was about 3 or 4 months where I realized I likely wasn't going back. And not because I was never going back to work, but because I wasn't going back there. It wasn't going to matter to anyone but me. And I wasted 3 months of living in this fear for no reason because ultimately I ended up taking the leap of the thing that I was afraid to do, which was quitting that job. So I want to invite you right now to reflect. I want you to think about who you are or who you were before fear told you who to be. What were your thoughts on something, or what was your opinion on something before maybe someone else's fear brought you to reflect on that, brought you to maybe change your mind? When have you felt most like yourself? Was it when you were creating something? Was it when you were able to just compartmentalize your money making career, which is like the way you make a living? So let's say that was your 9 to 5. Did you feel most like yourself when you were at a 9 to 5 where you could structure and say, you know what, I'm working from 9 to 5 and then I'm leaving and I'm going to go enjoy the rest of my life? Or maybe you felt most like yourself when you were in business for yourself and you were able to create and put out into the world and run your business and not have to worry about this fear of going back to work. I always encourage you to journal or to just think about something in silence because it's important for us to shut off noise. And so I'm always going to encourage you to do that. So right now I'm going to give you a little bit of a prompt, and I will post this on my social media and on YouTube, and I really want to dive in and talk about this with you guys. And that is, if I didn't care what anyone thought, I would dot dot dot. And I want you to share some of that with me. I want to talk about it. I don't want this to just be another episode and that kind of thing. So As you're listening right now, as you're catching up, please let's talk about it. Whether you're listening to it when this episode is released, whether you're listening to this in the future, I want to talk about it. I want to talk about if I didn't care what anyone thought, I would ... I'm going to take the next couple of minutes and I'm going to share with you some tools. I'm going to share with you some reflections on how to stop letting fear lead your life. Number one, I want you to name the fear. Fear thrives in the vagueness, in like the blurry details. So I want you to call it out. What are you afraid of? If you're going to be afraid of failure, understand that you could fail either way. So why not just do it? And because you're going to be afraid anyway. Name it. Name the thing that you're afraid of. Give it a name so that you can grab that name and do something about it. Number two, interrupt the pattern. Recognize when fear is speaking. Do something out of character on purpose. Interrupt the pattern, meaning I always say that I'm afraid to go to the gym because I'm afraid of what other people are going to see. First of all, I've said this on this podcast before. We are so concerned with what everyone else is thinking that we don't realize that no one else is thinking about us. They're thinking about themselves. So, yeah, actually go to the gym by yourself. Do it. If you're going to be afraid either way, then you might as well be afraid at the gym. If you're afraid to put yourself out there and ask someone to come shadow them in what they do because you want to pursue what it is that they're doing, you're going to be afraid about putting yourself out there anyway. So at least if you do it, you'll be able to know what to expect. You learn from doing. Number three, rehearse the rejection. So literally the thought process that I've been handling over the last couple of weeks is I'm just going to do this. What's the worst that can happen? It doesn't work out. The worst that can happen is actually that you don't do it and you let fear run you. So rehearse the rejection. Rehearse what that little bit of judgment or that little bit of rejection is going to do. It's going to build your resilience. Number four, reframe the worst case. Again, like I said, walk through the worst case scenario. Understand that you have handled every worst case scenario up until this point. So if you walk through it and you think about it and you go through that, realize that you can handle it. Number five, create a no filter vision. I know sometimes people can struggle with this one. So I want you to take logic out of all of it. No filter of logic. Stop focusing on what's logical because that fear is going to hold you back. Write down your truest desires as if fear doesn't exist, as if the limit does not exist. And then I want you to read them daily. I want you to consistently be on top of those truest desires. And number six, surround yourself with courage. Community matters. It matters so much. Who challenges you to act boldly or who challenges you to do anything? And they do it from a position of not being fearful. Surround yourself by, maybe it needs to be strangers for some time. Maybe it needs to be people that don't quote unquote really know you because you're going to receive that boost from that community. So put yourself in front of this community of strangers because they're going to have your back. They're going to pour into you. They're going to tell you you can do it. They might even tell you that you can do it more than the people that you call your best friends. Number seven, practice tiny acts of bravery. Start small, maybe speak up in a smaller discussion when you're with a group of people and they do that thing at the end where like, oh, does anyone have any questions? Make it throughout that entire time that maybe you look for a question to ask. Put yourself out there. Because you know what? At some point or another, you've been in a room where you asked a question, or I'm sorry, that someone asked a question and because they asked their question, it triggered a question for you and you felt brave enough to ask that question. So why don't you be that person? Start small, speak up, maybe post something that will make you vulnerable. And the last one of that little act of bravery, ask for something that you want. Whether that's you're making a return somewhere or you want a store to price match you, ask for it. The least that they can say is no. That's the biggest thing that they could say is no. I want to recommend a book to you guys. I've been on a little bit of a Mel Robbins kick, so it kind of is what it is. But the book that I want to recommend today is The High Five Habit. It's an empowering book. It teaches you kind of how to like rewire the self-doubt, and it helps you create inner courage, and it has you do powerful daily actions. So that it is very simple, this book. Whether you're an Audible listener or you're an audio book listener or you like to read, I think it's a really good book. And she's also very concise in what it is that she's mentioning. So I want to ask you one more time, who would you be without fear? I want you to visualize one thing that you would feel that you could do this week that would make you feel brave. I want to hear from you. I If you could DM me, journal about your vision, share it with me. I love when you guys share your different goals or your takeaways from an episode. And I also want you to share this episode with someone that you know is ready to break free from fear, or maybe you just had a conversation with someone that maybe they were expressing to you how scared they were about something, or how they were feeling stuck in a situation. So I want you to share this episode with them. And before we end this episode, I want to encourage you to leave us a review wherever you listen to your podcasts. We are on all streaming platforms: Spotify, Apple, YouTube. Leave us a 5-star review. We definitely appreciate it. Thank you for listening. Come back again next week for another episode of You the Boss podcast.